Hey guys, and welcome to today's video where we are going to be talking about arguably the biggest reality TV show of the 2010s and the 2020s, which is Love Island. Specifically, I want to talk about why I think Love Island is a dying concept, and it's still drawing in like millions of viewers, but every season is seeing fewer people drawn in, more complaints as fan favourite challenges get cut or the contestants don't measure up to previous years, and most recently a documentary from Channel 4 that revealed that actually life after Love Island is not what people expect it to be. And it's also worth noting that I'm going to be focusing on the UK version of the show because that's the version that I watch, and also it's the biggest and most viewed of all the different versions. I think probably the next best one is Love Island Australia, which I have watched season 1 of but I haven't watched any more of. I'm going to focus on the UK version because I think that makes the most sense to use as a subject for the video because it was the original one and it's the one that I watch, rather than trying to go into detail about every single country's version. So before we start, make sure that you are subscribed down below with notifications on, and don't forget to leave a like on this video if you do go on to enjoy it. Also, can we have a moment for how well this lipstick matches with this turtleneck? Like, she's an icon. Okay, so first of all, for anyone who either lives under a rock or just does not watch TV, let's have a quick let's have a quick recap of what Love Island is. So Love Island is a reality show where young people are put into a villa and told that they must couple up and win the hearts of the public in order to stay in the villa. They are cut off from the outside world completely, they have no communication with their friends or family or anyone else, and the couple who gets the most votes from the public on the final day of being in the villa will get a prize of £50,000. So generally the show will start with like 10 or 11 original islanders, 5 to 6 boys and 5 to 6 girls. One gender of the contestant will line up, and then one by one the contestants of the other gender will come in and they will choose who they want to couple up with. Originally the couples were determined by the islanders themselves, so they would come in and they would say, I fancy you, I'm going to couple up with you. But in the most recent series they said the public decided who would couple up with who on the first day, I think because there were a few contestants who no one wanted to couple up with them, which was quite damaging to their self-esteem, quite embarrassing. So I think they tried to cut that out and was like, right, we'll just let the public couple you up instead. So these couples can be changed as new people come in. There'll be generally one recoupling per week where the islanders will choose who they want to couple up with. They can either stay in their couple or they can choose someone else. And even in the first episode, if the first boy to enter couples up with a girl and then the second boy who comes in decides that he wants to couple up with that girl, he can do that and the boy goes on the subs bench. So it's kind of cutthroat. There's a lot of shifting between couples and people will change their couples as the show goes on. And the aim of the game is for all of these single people to end up in happy couples where they would fall in love and live happily ever after and potentially take away £50,000 if the public like them enough. And in order to keep it interesting, new contestants will enter the show throughout, and challenges and games designed to stir up drama will be played in order to test the strength of the existing couples and potentially tempt them towards someone new. Such challenges include the heart rate challenge, for example, where each contestant dresses up in a revealing outfit and does essentially a striptease for all of the contestants of the other gender, and at the end it's revealed whose heart rate was raised the most by who. This is impossible to be objectively measured from an audience or contestant point of view, so this is one challenge where only the producers know what the truth is and they can kind of spin it to whatever they think will cause the most drama. Basically, the producers on the show are absolute menaces and will deliberately stir up drama, which does make good TV, but has caused Love Island to come under criticism in recent years for a few notable incidents that we're going to talk about later. I think that mostly covers off the premise of Love Island. It originated actually with a celebrity version years ago that didn't do that well, but was revamped with ordinary people for the format that it's known for now and has been recreated in this format across the globe. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to treat the first series in this format as the first series rather than the celebrity one, because the original Love Island hasn't really had any influence on Love Island as we know it now. Whilst we all have a grasp on Love Island's popularity purely from seeing so many people talking about it when it's on and following the cast after the show, I think we should briefly go over the stats to get the bigger picture of how Love Island has actually gotten so big since it first started in 2015. So the first series of Love Island began on the 7th of June 2015, having been announced back in February 2015, and it lasted for 5 weeks with an average of 570,000 viewers per episode. The series was eventually won by Max Morley and Jess Hayes, with runners-up John Clark and Hannah Elizabeth actually getting engaged during the finale of the show, which when you watch Love Island now, now, the thought of someone actually getting engaged on this show is wild. And the next series in 2016 was won by Cara Delehoyd and Nathan Massey, and drew in an average of 1.47 million viewers per episode, almost tripling the viewing figures from the previous year. And this series lasted a week longer and began on the 30th of May 2016, ending on the 11th of July. And viewing figures increased again in 2017, with 2.52 million people tuning in every night to eventually see Amber Davis and Kem Ketaney take the crown. And by 2018, the show was a summer staple for many people across the country, with 3.96 million people watching every night and voting in the final episode for Danny Dyer and Jack Fincham to win the show after coupling up on day one. Now, for these first few series, there was a trend that normally the couple who won would be the couple who were together from the very start, with the exception of the first series. But 2019 was the show's biggest year yet, and it didn't follow this trend. So 2019 drew in an average of 5.61 million viewers every evening for 8 weeks. And whilst Amber Gill and Greg O'Shea clinched the win, arguably the best known influencer to come from this series came from the 2019 series, which was Molly May. And 2020 was where Love Island's steamroll started to kind of slow down, with only 3.96 million tuning in to see the winter version of the show, which was won by Paige Turley and Finn Tapp. So 2021 slightly improved on this, with 4.17 million watching Millie Court and Liam Reardon take the crown, and 2022 improved again with 4.46 million on average watching every night, and eventually voting for Ekin-Su and Davide to win. So overall, from 2015 to 2019, there was an 11-fold increase in viewership, with that dropping to a 9-fold increase when taking into account 2020, 2021 and 2022. However, despite fluctuating viewership since 2019, the show has seen a year-on-year increase in applications, with more than double the number of people applying last year than who applied to go to Oxford or Cambridge, the most prestigious universities in the UK and two of the best universities in the world. So the question is then, how and why did Love Island become the modern phenomenon that it is now? The first point is that it was new. We'd seen dating shows before, but never where the contestants were literally stuck with each other for weeks on end with no contact with anyone else. The closest thing to that was Big Brother, which was not a dating show, and so it was a brand new and interesting concept. So secondly is the people. Everyone who goes on Love Island is conventionally attractive, and watching attractive people argue over their relationships for 6 weeks is pretty entertaining for the average viewer. And it's also interesting just to see the in and outs of people's relationships. Like normal dating shows, they show people meeting, bits of them kind of getting along, and then the outcome of whether they're together or not. They didn't show you the entirety of their relationship from start to finish, from their arguments to their sex life, but Love Island did. It gave an insight into people that really we'd never seen before, and it felt more natural and more real than other dating shows to start with, because these people were being filmed 24/7, so they had nowhere to hide and they would show their entire selves. And you inevitably become invested in these people and their lives, and you root for your favourites because you really get to know them, because you watch them for an hour every night, and it's hard not to form opinions on people and their relationships when you have so much exposure to them. So people are kind of drawn back to see what happens to their favourites next. And it was also absolutely outrageous to start with. Like, they sent the boys in season 1 on a lad's holiday to Magaluf and then showed the footage of it to the girls when they got back. Like, you cannot imagine them doing that now that the show is so big and the contestants are so well known. But these antics hadn't been broadcasted this way before. Like, the closest thing that you got was when Geordie Shore or Towie went on tour and they went to like Zante or somewhere like that. So viewers were drawn in on the basis of what wild thing is going to happen next. Like, nowadays it's more tame than that, but the producers will still throw in a shake-up every now and then to keep the contestants and the audience on their toes. And the show was so popular with applicants because it was seen as accessible. You don't need a special talent, you don't need to be a genius, you just need to be conventionally pretty and likeable enough that people will vote for you, or an outright villain so that people will keep you in for entertainment purposes. And the show has also cracked the 16 to 34 age range that other reality shows fail to fully engage, and that combined with the show's format of being on every single night meant that audience engagement on social media is massively higher than it is for other shows. People between 16 and 34 are the most active group of social media users, and over the years Love Island has become not just a TV phenomenon but also a Twitter phenomenon. If you log into Twitter between 9 and 10 p.m. any night in the summer, you can't escape the Love Island tweets because they are everywhere. It's at the point now where the memes and the tweets are almost as much a part of the experience as actually watching the show itself, and it's almost like a FOMO effect where if you don't watch the show, you still know what's going on because it's all over your social media feed. So you may as well watch it to get the entertainment value out of all the posts that you see about it. And the same goes for in real life conversations. When all of your friends are watching and talking about it, you're also going to want to be able to join in. So that herd mentality helped the Love Island bug to spread quickly amongst this age group. And no other reality show has had this level of social media engagement, and I feel like this is what boosted Love Island's popularity far beyond other shows, because it was inescapable, and seeing so many posts about it makes people inevitably curious and draws them into watching Love Island. There's also the fact that producers can see what the general reception to things is and then plan the next episode according to what people are wanting to see. If people are bored, they'll throw in a twist or a challenge. If people are asking for a contestant to go on a date, they will bring new people in and ensure that that contestant gets on that date. And they can basically do whatever the audience wants to keep them engaged because people are so vocal about what they want to see on social media. However, one of the main reasons why I think Love Island is on the demise is actually that by getting so popular, it was always destined to be its own downfall. And that's because people are not going on Love Island for the reasons that the show was created. It's kind of a joke amongst the viewers now that the female contestants especially only want to go on the show because they want that influencer life. They want to be the next Molly May, and they feel like Love Island is a quick route to getting there. Kind of like how the X Factor was a quick route to getting a record deal. And the problem is that we've already got Molly May, so we don't need another one of her, and it would be really difficult for anyone to go on there and have the carefully curated plan that Molly May had to make herself into a celebrity after leaving the show, because it would be completely transparent to the viewers what she was trying to do. Once it's been done, it's very hard for anyone to recreate that with the same success. And Love Island really thrived in 2017 to 2019, but 2017 and 2018 especially, because whilst the show was popular, it wasn't known as the kind of influencer machine that it is now. Like, people were still genuinely going on there to find love. Think of Camilla and Jamie, for example, from 2017, two of the most genuine human beings who are now married with 2 kids. Like, you could tell that neither of them was there for the fame or the money that the show might give them, and people fell in love with these two, and we just aren't seeing in the recent series people bringing their entire unapologetic selves to the table, except perhaps Ekin-Su. Ekin was like a breath of fresh air on this season because she essentially did whatever she wanted. She did not care about whether the public voted for her and caused absolute chaos. Her game plan might have been to make the public love her for being an absolute menace, but if it was, then all credits to her because she did a fantastic job. And people lapped it up because she felt like one of the first contestants who was 100% there to find love in the last few seasons, because everyone else has in the back of their minds that if they make it far enough, they might be able to swing a PLT deal. I would also say Liam from 2022 was a genuine guy, but unfortunately he left after a week or so we can't really be sure how he would have fared had he stayed. But this year, I felt like I got the vibe from a lot of people that they were being very careful because they wanted to make sure they didn't do anything that would jeopardize their chance at influencer success after the show. Obviously, drama ensued. We had the famous licked her tit or whatever, but the people who came in and caused drama, it kind of felt like they were doing so that they would get airtime enough that the public would want them to stay. And one recent show that I watched that I think really demonstrates our thirst for a reality show with real ordinary people is The Traitors. So for anyone outside of the UK, I have to apologise because you have missed out on a fantastic bit of telly. Genuinely, The Traitors is one of the best shows that I've watched in a long time. Like, I even considered making a whole video about that show, but I felt like because half my audience couldn't actually go and watch it for themselves, I wouldn't want to do like a dedicated video. But actually, everything I wanted to say about that show fits in perfectly here in demonstrating why Love Island is not serving our reality TV show appetites anymore. So, warning for anyone who's planning to watch The Traitors, there are going to be spoilers in the next section of the video, so please skip to this timestamp if you don't want any of those. So for all of my non-UK viewers or any UK viewers who haven't seen it, The Traitors was a new reality show created by the BBC which aired during December, and the premise was that 22 people entered into a castle where they would live for 12 days. So on day 1, 3 people were selected as traitors, whilst the remaining 19 were faithfuls. So throughout the 12 days, they would do missions to win money to add to the prize pot, and then at the end of each day, all the players would gather to discuss and vote off one person who they thought was a traitor. The traitors would then, after this roundtable discussion, meet in secret and murder a player of their choice to eliminate them from the game. If the faithfuls managed to vote out all of the traitors before the end, then the remaining faithfuls would split the prize pot. But if there was any traitors remaining at the end, the traitors would take the entire thing for themselves. Now, the show had some twists and turns, such as 2 players being eliminated before the game even started, but then being brought back in, 2 players revealing that they were secretly in a relationship, 1 player being given the option to either be murdered or become a traitor, and the general drama that comes with putting a load of people in one place and telling them that 3 of them are bad eggs and they need to find out which ones are the bad eggs amongst them. Like, it was basically a real life game of Among Us. And what made this show so fantastic was the people. They were all ordinary people from all walks of life. The age range was 21 to 72. Multiple players had disabilities. There were jobs ranging from property agent to senior charity fundraiser to magician to actor. And watching all of these ordinary people and how they dealt with this situation at hand was so interesting. To start with, we didn't really know any of them. So when the 3 traitors were selected, you didn't know how they might react. You didn't know how they'd deal with the guilt, whether they would take the lead or sit in the background, because you have no idea what that person's personality is really like. And as we went through the game, it was actually the 2 traitors that you would expect to struggle with it the most. Sweet Amanda, who's like a mother figure to everyone there and really bonded with everyone, and Wilf, who was like the lovable entertainer bouncing around all over the place, who made it the furthest. And Wilf nearly won after throwing all of his other traitors under the bus. Honestly, watching Hannah slowly realise that Wilf was a traitor in literally the last 5 minutes of the game after defending him the entire time was TV gold. Like, you could not predict what was going to happen, and it was impossible to predict from the beginning who would make it to the end, because you had no idea how easy it would be for people to turn on one another. Literally at the round tables, which is where there was discussions followed by eliminations, it was so difficult to predict who was going to go because people changed their minds so quickly. Like, they would go into it and you're sure that they're going to vote Aaron off, but then they turn around and banish Imran instead, who didn't actually do anything wrong. His personality just didn't gel with the others. So having that show where it's like so unpredictable, but it's all genuinely real people just trying to figure out a problem, was really refreshing. And honestly, I think the reason that the show did so well was that the audience loved watching real people take on this moral dilemma of either having to constantly betray their fellow players or having to decide every night who you trust the least and who shouldn't get a shot at that money. It's the kind of situation that you would normally only see in scripted TV shows, so seeing how real people dealt with it made for a really addicting TV show to watch. And also because none of the contestants went in there with presumptions about how the game would work or what the best strategy would be, people were generally unafraid to be themselves, even the traitors. Like, there were a few who kept secrets from the other players, but they were in the minority, and they only did so if they thought that the other players would be suspicious of them if they revealed that secret. The fact that no one could truly plan in advance for how to win made it a really entertaining watch, and I think that's what Love Island lacks nowadays. Some of the best moments in The Traitors happened unexpectedly and purely as a result of people's natural reactions to things. Like Wilf selling out Amanda and Alyssa as traitors because he was paranoid about them selling him out, even though there was no indication that they were going to do that. Like Tom exploding at breakfast because Alex was put on trial and revealing to everyone that they'd lied about their relationship. Aaron having a breakdown when people voted for him and then being accused of being a traitor by John for overreacting. Like, it was intense, but it was easy to see that no one was putting on a facade, and it was a brand new situation they were navigating, and they were just reacting instinctively rather than in a calculated way. And The Traitors was reminiscent of season 1 of Love Island, where the people in it had no expectations of what would happen after the show. They were simply living in the moment and doing whatever felt right for them rather than for the cameras. Whereas now it feels like a lot of people go in with an agenda of wanting to make money, and finding love is just an added extra if it happens. However, Channel 4's documentary on life after Love Island shows that the reality is that most people who go on the Love Island will not achieve that agenda. They won't leave the show with millions of followers and brand deals coming out of their ears. Only the select few get that, whilst others are left wondering how to make the most of what they've got and why they didn't make it, while their castmates are getting amazing deals and raking in tons of cash. And the first Islander who's shown in this documentary is Coco Lodge, who was on the 2022 season as a Casa Amor contestant and became infamous for creating the licked her tit or whatever drama that became an iconic line from the show. She said that she hasn't actually been paid yet since leaving, and only 6 weeks after being dumped from the show, she was going back to her old job as a shop girl because she wasn't getting enough offers from brands to make being an influencer her career, as she only got 30,000 followers from being on the show. It's weird because she was being recognised by a lot of people, and yet that recognition is not enough to pay her bills, and she has to work a normal job whilst keeping up her Instagram. And all the people who were interviewed who saw her on that night were shocked to see that she wasn't living at large in London, which I think shows the disconnect between people's expectations that all Love Islanders will go on to become like mega rich and famous, and the reality that actually most of them don't. Think about how Adam Collard came back. Like, he was never on Love Island to find love, even in the first series, and it's pretty obvious that he only came back to Love Island because his career was dying. He had nearly 1 million followers but was only getting 3,000 likes on a photo, so going back on the show was the only way that he knew how to revive his career, because that's how he'd got on that career in the first place. But people had forgotten about him because so many more Love Islanders had come through the ranks since his series. And this documentary also shows interviews with celebrity agents who are the key to Love Island making money, because they are the ones who negotiate the deals. They interestingly said that the people who are the most successful are the ones who go on Love Island expecting nothing, which nowadays is a very slim proportion of contestants, if any. And they also lay out the harsh reality that the most attractive and the most charismatic contestants are the ones that are going to do well. If you're above average but you're stood next to someone who looks like they were sent down from the gods, the person next to you is unfortunately more likely to be successful than you, because people will be more likely to follow them just off of their looks. There's been 250 contestants now over the 8 series, so inevitably most of them will become forgettable in an already overcrowded influencer market. And the stats showed that half had returned to their normal jobs, with only 28 of them making a deal worth at least 6 figures. And that's roughly 1 in 10 who make it. So for every success story, there's 9 people who don't make it, who nowadays don't have as many avenues to make money as they did previously, because club appearances are just not the moneymaker that they were back in like 2018/19. None of the post-COVID series have seen ex-contestants do the like 90-day PR tours that contestants pre-COVID would do after leaving the show. And people who were on the show for only like a couple of weeks, who didn't make it right till the end, could still make a good chunk of money if they could get an agent to set up a huge press tour for them. But now there just isn't the appetite for it anymore. And Ikenna, who was on this year's series for a couple of weeks, having started as an original Islander, the ones who usually do the best because they're there for the longest, only made 3,000 to 4,000 in 3 months after leaving the show, which is less than the majority of people in graduate jobs would make. And one thing that the documentary points out is that only one of the top 15 most followed ex-contestants is non-white, that being Amber Gill, the 2019 winner, showing that non-white contestants like Ikenna are generally less successful out of the show than the white contestants. And on the show, we consistently see the black or mixed race or Asian contestants shunned by their white counterparts. Think about, for example, Samira in series 4. She was constantly rejected, no one ever fancied her, and when she did find that someone she liked, he cheated on her the minute that he left the villa. Omar in series 2 was the joke of the villa. He never found love, and it became a running joke amongst the contestants that no girls were interested in him. This year, when the public got the choice of who to be paired up to start with, all the black contestants were paired with each other. And it's been noted many times by viewers and ex-contestants that the non-white contestants are not viewed as favourably as the white contestants, both by the public and by the other participants. Of course, there have also been white contestants who've struggled to find love. For example, Dr. Alex from season 4 and Hugo from series 7, who is the biggest walking ick I've ever come across. That man is my enemy. But they are generally seen as like the lovable nice guy, except for Hugo, who became unbearably cringy by about halfway in, and kept in the show because people feel sorry for them, whereas the black contestants who struggle don't seem to get the same level of sympathy from the public. And it's particularly the black female contestants who don't seem to have an easy ride. Like India, I think from this most recent series, was the first who had multiple guys genuinely interested in her and ended up in a long-term successful couple. She was the first black woman who didn't have to jump through a ton of hoops to have the same Love Island experience as her white counterparts. Even those who do make it far, aren't guaranteed the same level of success as the white finalist or near finalist. Like, India has kind of broken the mold by signing huge deals and maintaining a high profile, but previous contestant Priscilla, who made it to 2 days before the final, came out of the show to find that no agents were interested in her, making her feel like while Love Island puts black contestants in there for diversity, the culture and the influencer market doesn't treat them the same, even if they performed well on the show. Like, she has to rent studios and pay for photographers in order to get photos to market herself to brands, whereas others from her series have brands queuing up to work with them without all of that. And it's, of course, a popularity game, but there's no real reason why out of the 9 series, we've only seen 3 couples containing at least one non-white contestant in the top 3. Obviously, Love Island themselves are not responsible for how the public reacts to contestants, but they are responsible for who they put in there. And when they throw in 5 guys at the start who all say that their type is blondes with blue eyes, the black girl in the original lineup is obviously going to be doomed from the start. Like, they don't make any effort to put contestants in who will actually be attracted to the non-white contestants. And so every year we get the same story of the non-white contestant who doesn't get picked by anyone and has to struggle their way through to eventually find just one person who does fancy them, a struggle that their fellow contestants don't have to face. And this struggle, faced particularly by non-white contestants, however, is not the only looks-based criticism that Love Island as a format has received. So the show has always been based on conventionally attractive people getting with each other. That's the simple premise. But as the years have gone on, people have become more and more frustrated with the show's perpetuation that only straight, thin people who conform to conventional beauty standards are attractive. People have asked for the show to cast contestants with more body diversity, to which producers responded saying they don't put in place any requirement for the contestants to be thin, only that they're single and looking for love. However, the lack of plus-sized contestants following this statement in 2021 shows that the producers just don't believe that anyone who is not stick-thin is attractive enough to go on the show. It's at the point now where Love Island is praised for body diversity when contestants are a size 8. Like, Alexandra from season 5 talked openly about how people were praising the casting team for her being a bigger contestant when she was literally a size 8. And Anna Vicali had the same treatment happen to her. She was a size 8, and people talked about her showing that the show could be body diverse. Like, she is a thin girl. She is not an example of body diversity. And we live in a very diverse society where the average women's dress size in the UK is a 14, whereas the majority of the contestants on the show will be a 6. And the contestants themselves have talked about feeling like an intense pressure to be super thin when going on the show for fear of being trolled online if they weren't. And Ellie Brown from season 4 has openly talked about being in an intense exercise regime with a heavily restricted diet before going on the show, working out multiple hours a day to ensure that she was at her best when she entered, which is not a healthy or a sustainable way to lose weight. And the lack of body diversity perpetuates the idea that to be attractive you must be skinny, and furthers the body image issues that social media already gives a lot of people, young women in particular, because they feel like if they don't look like the influencers that they see online or the stars on Love Island, then they aren't attractive. And eating disorders are on the rise, and shows like Love Island aren't helping, where contestants are all very thin, or in the case of the men, they tend to be very muscly, very toned, which is a figure that a lot of people watching the show will not have, but will feel pressure to attain in order to be perceived as attractive by others. And it really goes without saying that the show does not do very much to promote self-love at all, where the value of a contestant is based on how many other people are interested in them and how successful they are at causing chaos or finding love. So it almost makes out to young people that in order to be successful, you have to be attractive to others, rather than promoting that you don't need to change yourself in order to be attractive, because personality counts more than outer looks. And a lot of the contestants nowadays have also had surgery prior to going on the show. The vast majority of the 2021 series had some form of Botox or fillers alongside boob jobs and nose jobs. And whilst that is very much the choice of the individual, and they should not hide the fact that they've had surgery if they feel comfortable openly talking about it, I do feel like the more popular the show has gotten, the more pressure the contestants are under to make themselves perfect before going on the show in order to avoid being seen as like the ugly duckling contestant, either by the public or by their fellow contestants. And this pressure, I think, stems not only from the format of the show being based on how attractive other people find you, but also the fact that the contestants from the show are heavily trolled regardless of how popular they are. The Channel 4 documentary found that of all the tweets aimed at female islanders, 26% of them were ranked as trolling or negative comments, whilst that figure was 14% for the male contestants. And Paige Turley, who won the 2020 series, said that she experienced anxiety and low moods that she had never had before going on the show in the years since winning. And Jess Hayes, who won the first series, talked about the negative turn that her mental health took as a result of trolling and of work drying up as people stopped caring about you the longer it's been since your series. And the show is so big now that where you get a contestant who is not particularly well liked or is not seen as attractive by viewers, they will get intensely trolled both whilst on the show and when they come off it. Take Coco, for example. She was the subject of a lot of criticism for the way that she looked and the way that she was portrayed on the show, and that trolling led her to feeling anxious about what people would think of her. It would take a very strong-minded person with an unbreakable sense of self to not be affected by troll comments after putting yourself out there on a reality show, especially where those comments are coming in droves. Savannah Darnell was a Casa Amor girl in the 2018 series of the show, and even though she was only on the show for a number of days, the trolling that she experienced when coming out sent her spiraling into a deep depression, according to recent interviews given by her mum. So Savannah did not get very much airtime on the show, but this did not stop people from sending her death threats, calling her the ugliest contestant that had ever been on the show, and sending a constant barrage of hate comments to all of her social media, leading her to feel unable to get out of bed and needing therapy to get through it. And thankfully she did recover and she got her career back on track, but unfortunately the pressure of fame and the harassment that comes after the show was too much for two former contestants, Sophie Graydon and Mike Thalasitis, who both sadly took their own lives after appearing on the show. So Sophie had publicly spoken on social media before her death about her struggle with depression and anxiety, and whilst Mike hadn't been so open about his mental health, both of their deaths in 2019 sparked a discussion about the treatment of reality stars and how Love Island contributed to the harassment of their contestants when they leave the show by spinning storylines in order to make certain people look bad or break up relationships unnecessarily. One such incident was when they brought in Jack Fincham's ex-girlfriend to Casa Amor and then sent his girlfriend, who was in the other villa, a video of him reacting to his ex's arrival, sending Danny into a spiral because she was not aware that Jack had stayed 100% loyal to her, as the producers had made it look like he was going to go back to his ex. It was cruel, it was unnecessary, and it sparked over 4,000 Ofcom complaints about how Danny had been manipulated by the producers. They didn't learn though, and 2 years later they showed Faye Winters a clip of her partner Teddy telling another girl that he found her attractive, even though he never actually acted on that attraction, deliberately sending Faye into a rage where she launched a string of vile insults at Teddy and anyone else who tried to calm her down. Like, the producers knew that they could manipulate Faye into flying off the handle, and so they did, with Teddy becoming collateral damage. They also allowed the boys in the 2022 season to slut-shame Ekin and bully Tasha, whilst encouraging the male contestants like Davide to act in the same way. If Ekin, for example, got with 3 guys, then she was a slut, but when Davide did it, he was praised for being a player and they all laughed about it. When Tasha cried, it was justifiable for Dami and Luca to make fun of her and criticise her for overreacting and throw pies in her face, but if anyone else cried, they were met with sympathy from the boys. The producers would reward toxic behaviour where it makes good TV, and will only stop it when people lose interest in the show, which at the current rate doesn't look like it's going to happen. It makes for really uncomfortable watching, seeing Luca criticise Gemma for even looking at another guy and behave very controllingly, whilst he simultaneously bullies Tasha for no reason, and seeing him get no reprimand from the producers for his behaviour. Young people should not be looking at this and seeing a healthy relationship, but there was really no indication from anyone on the show that the way he was behaving wasn't acceptable. The show allowed misogyny and controlling behaviour to be platforms to millions of viewers without any note to say, hey, don't use Luca as an example for how to behave towards women because he's very controlling. Like, there was no indication towards the public that the producers were willing to step in and say, hey, you need to stop because this is bordering on an abusive relationship. However, whilst the show allows contestants to behave in ways that are borderline abusive or are likely to become abusive if they're allowed to develop, they have also received criticism in recent years for becoming too PG, so there's kind of no way for the show to win. Following Mike, Sophie and presenter Caroline Flack's deaths, the show has massively reeled in what they do and don't show on camera and what challenges the contestants are made to participate in. For example, challenges like the Twitter challenge or the headline challenge, where contestants would find out what the public thought of them, have been cut since the 2019 series. The lie detector hasn't been seen since 2018, and there's no longer the same graphic montages, so it's showing the contestants having sex in the villa. It's a catch-22 for the show now, because people are very conscious about the contestants' mental health and criticise the show doing things that will inevitably upset one of the islanders. But at the same time, they complain that the show is boring because their favourite challenges have been cut. It's hard for a show like Love Island to maintain the success and the praise that it had at the beginning when people are not going on there for love anymore. They're casting influencers instead of ordinary people because they feel like the influencers will be able to cope better with criticism when leaving the show. But at the same time, that makes the pool of contestants much less diverse than it was originally, which was what made it such a great show. It's becoming less interesting each year as it goes from being people working as receptionists or bricklayers to relatives of famous people and Instagram models, because those people are obviously there to build their profile, whereas at least with an ordinary person, they can put on some sort of facade that they're there for love, even though we all know that they're not. And recently it was announced that for the winter series of Love Island, which by the time you see this, that series will have started, that the producers were going to ask that the contestants' Instagrams, Twitters, all social media were left dormant, so they would not have any activity on their social media whilst they were on the show. And I wonder how that is going to affect A, the number of people who are applying, and B, the amount of engagement that people get if they're not posting to constantly kind of build up their following. And I think this is likely as a result of the handlers who had hold of the contestants' social media last year, because Luca's sister in particular, she justified all of his controlling, borderline abusive behaviour. She would clap back at people, she would argue with people. Davide's handlers would slut shame Ekin-Su. Jack's handlers tried to justify his abusive behaviour by saying he had ADHD, and this caused massive backlash for the handlers and the contestants. So I think this is probably why they've decided, actually, we don't want you to do this, we don't want any activity on your social media because we don't want people to be stirring up drama with fans. But I do wonder how that's going to affect people's desire to go on the show if they can't have someone build their social media for them and build their profile whilst they're on there, because people are less likely to follow someone if they know they're not going to see any posts from them for at least 8 weeks. And Love Island kind of revived a dying reality TV scene. Like, the X Factor was cancelled, Big Brother was cancelled, there weren't really any other shows coming through that were drawing people in, but when Love Island came on the scene, it was finally a reality show that would draw in the 16 to 34 range, who hadn't really been taken in by a show in the same way since the original Geordie Shore, Towie and Made in Chelsea. However, every show has an inevitable expiry date. You know, X Factor was huge in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, but the more series there were, the more boring the format got, especially as the judges started to mellow their comments as TV started to become more conscious of contestant bullying, which is exactly what we're seeing happen with Love Island. Geordie Shore never really got more PG, but as the original cast left one by one, people started to get bored. They weren't as attached to the new characters. Even those who remained were getting older, and it just wasn't as entertaining to see Scotty T pull a girl every night at the age of 27 as it was when he was 20. And when a show never changes its format, it will eventually become boring and people will stop watching because of how repetitive it is. We have a certain availability bias with Love Island where we overestimate how good or important it is just because it's familiar, but it will start to become less interesting the more series there are that use the same format and the same type of people. And ITV have already gotten greedy with putting on a winter series as well as the summer series, and whilst that only lasted for one series previously due to COVID cancelling the 2020 summer season, there was over a 2 million viewer drop between summer 2019 and winter 2020. So having a winter edition every single year now is only going to exhaust the show even faster than it already has been. Like, people don't want 2 series of Love Island a year because it's just going to get boring. And I do think that the show is slowly but surely losing traction because they are exhausting their format, and whilst they're making some changes each year, they're not really making big enough changes to breathe new life into the show when they've had to remove some of what made it so entertaining in order to protect the contestants. And as it's become bigger and bigger, Love Island has become less and less about love because it's seen as a stepping stone to a life of fame and riches. The show itself is beginning to seem fake because the people who are going on there are going on for the wrong reasons. And any show would have the same problem if it had the same explosion in popularity as Love Island and had such a niche pool of contestants to choose from. Shows like Big Brother continue to be successful over a number of years because the diverse pool of contestants meant that the ones who were obviously trying to launch a career by going on it could be easily weeded out by producers. Where Love Island only allows young, attractive people to go on, basically the blueprint for an influencer, they're shooting themselves in the foot because the show is seen as an influencer factory rather than as a genuine search for love. And this is why I think shows like The Traitors do so well, because no one goes in expecting to become famous. They go in wanting to win some money, which is made extremely clear in the beginning because that's literally the only reason that they're there. There's no secondary objectives, there's no qualms about admitting that what you want is money, whereas with Love Island the money is supposed to be a nice bonus rather than the aim of the show. And overall, I think it's starting to become more well known that Love Island, whilst it has produced some rich and famous people, is not a guarantee of success. And actually the price that the unsuccessful contestants pay is not worth what they get out of it. However, the lure of a lucrative career of being paid to wear nice clothes is strong and will continue to draw people in, even if they know it's only a small chance that they'll be one of the lucky ones. But I will be interested to see how this new rule about social media will impact how successful people coming out of the show are and how many applicants there are. And I think once we get through this series of the winter show, we'll see just how much difference there's going to be. Hence why I think this is the slow demise of Love Island. The show is slowly but surely losing its appeal to both contestants and viewers as the format becomes overused and stale, and the contestants become less interested in finding love and more interested on what they might get out of it at the end of the show, although it'll be years yet before we see Love Island truly fall from its pedestal at the top of the reality TV game. So that is all that I have to say about Love Island for now. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, then be sure to leave a like, leave a comment with any thoughts that you might have, and subscribe to see more videos like this. I will leave a few of my other videos linked in the description down below if you want to watch any of those, but apart from that, I will hopefully see you all in my next one. Bye guys!